Welcome, my name is Rowena. I'm the director of the advising team at the Fulbright Commission. I'm an Education USA advisor, and I spend, along with my colleague Holly, we spend our time helping people in the UK apply to US universities. And yeah, so that's who I am. Over to Holly to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Holly Haig, and as Rowena mentioned, I'm also an Education USA advisor here in the UK. And so we're really excited that all of you have joined us this evening.
Perfect. Well, that's amazing. And so both Holly and I had the opportunity to study in the US. We love talking about that experience. And now, even though both of us are now based here in the UK, we love helping people explore US study. So if I could just ask Holly to move the slides on, please. So you might be wondering, what is this Education USA thing? How does this work? Education USA is a free network offering unbiased advice to anyone who would like to study in the US, whether that's to go and study for a full undergraduate degree, whether it's to study for a postgrad degree, whether it's to take on short-term study. We are here to support and help you. We will offer honest, real advice and promote all the universities across the USA. We don't charge for our services, you can't pay us anything, but we love sharing about both our own personal experiences and helping other people achieve those goals. Next slide. So fantastic. So we often get asked, why do people study in the USA? And we thought we might, before we get into exactly how to make the most of college day, just make sure that everyone's got a beginning piece of knowledge about US study. We know that lots of people might not have explored this a lot before. We get asked a lot of questions. So we thought we'd just give you a quick heads up of how US study works. And then we will talk about Saturday's Fair and how you can make the most of the event. So one of the questions we get asked is, why would you study in the US, especially if you're from the UK? And we have some answers. So see, these are some of the top reasons that British students tell us that they are interested in studying in the US, whether that's the reputation of US universities, whether that is the variety of US universities, that they're all quite different to each other. People really like that opportunity, whether it's to take part in campus life, whether that's sports games, clubs and societies, opportunities on campus, all of those things that you might have seen. We also get a lot of British students who are really interested in the academic flexibility of US study. So unlike in the UK, where you pick a course to study at university and then you go to university and study that course all the way through your degree, at a US university, you don't have to know what you want to study when you go into it. And actually most students take a range of classes for their first 2 years of their undergraduate degree before starting to specialise in perhaps one or two areas for the remainder of their degree. And that can be really exciting. If you're the kind of person who likes to study lots of different things, then the US could be a great fit for you. Lots of British students also look at the funding opportunities, and that might sound a bit funny because often we know that US universities can sound very expensive, but there are lots of funding opportunities out there, and certainly lots of British students take advantage of those funding opportunities. Employment, so studying in a different country and having that experience makes you stand out in a competitive job market. And certainly I know from my own experience, every time I've ever had a job interview, somebody wants to ask me about how I got to the US, where did I study, why did I go there, what was that all like? And so it can really make you stand out, and the skills that you learn can stand out in the job market when it comes to getting that job after university. And then finally, there's that opportunity to explore a country that's quite different to the UK, where we have lots of things in common, but actually lots of things are quite different. So that opportunity to explore the US as well. Next slide. So what are the big differences? There are a couple of really big differences if you're looking at an undergraduate degree in the US from looking at degrees here in the UK. So a couple of those big differences: in the UK, an undergraduate degree is normally 3 years long. In the US, it's standard to have a 4-year degree. And you still come out with the same qualification, but that's one of the big differences between the US and the UK. At a US university, because you're not necessarily applying to a specific course, you're applying into the university, not to a specific academic department, and that changes the application process, and we'll talk a bit more about that. The US has a lot less regulation about how its university sector runs. So what you'll find is that there are no set fees like there are here in the UK, and there are no set deadlines. So each university can do what it likes in its application process. So being aware of that as we go into this process. And then finally, I just want to mention law and medicine. These are two areas we get a lot of questions about here at Fulbright. And so I just want to flag that both law and medicine are not degrees that you can study at an undergraduate level in the USA. I know you can here in the UK, but for people who want to be a medic or a doctor or a lawyer, would do an additional graduate level, postgrad level, we would call it, degree in the US after doing an undergraduate degree. So if you're looking for undergraduate medicine or undergraduate law, you won't find those in the US. And we can talk a bit more about that if people have got questions. If you've got questions at all, we will have a Q&A session at the end, so please feel free to pop your questions in the Q&A box, and we will come back round to those at the end of this session. Next slide. Okay, so a quick sense of a timeline. What are the kind of steps to US study? Key piece around researching universities. You can be doing this if you are in anywhere before your final year of high school. So that could be if you're in England or Wales, could be kind of years 9, 10, 11, 12. Great time to be researching universities. Perhaps also taking those admissions exams, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Before going into the final year of school to actually make that application. So if that would be S6 in Scotland or year 14 in Northern Ireland. So as you go into your final year of high school, that's when you'll be actually making an application. The research though is really important. I can't stress that enough. But as you go into that final year, you would make an application. There is no limit on the number of schools you can apply to. Submit that application, receive an admissions decision, normally somewhere in the spring of that final year of high school, before applying for a visa, preparing to leave, and then actually starting your studies that following summer. So that's just a very straightforward sense of a timeline. Depending on where you are, you may need to speed up if you're going into your final year of high school and hope to start next summer, or you may be realizing that you've got time to do lots of great research. Next slide. Okay, so what factors do you need to think about when choosing university? And I think this is something that many people get really surprised by. In the US, there are 4,500 universities, accredited universities, offering undergraduate degrees. Whereas here in the UK, we've got about 120. So it can seem quite an overwhelming place to start when you're thinking about choosing a university in the US. So it's first of all recognizing that you can't know all of those universities, and that there could be a really good school that's a really good fit for you out there, and you just might not have met it yet. So how do you go about choosing university? It's the first thing to do is to start thinking about the factors that are important to you. So this is this idea of fit, and if the university runs a competitive admissions process, I cannot stress this enough, that fit is absolutely important to your application. Fit is a sense of, is this university a good fit for what I want to achieve from my studies? Does it offer the major that I'm interested in? Does it offer the learning style that I would like? Is it a good academic match? Am I going to be finding that I can keep up in the classes? Am I going to be able to receive any scholarships or financial aid that might make me a good fit for this university? But also it works the other way as well. For the university, they're going to be looking at you and your application to decide if you are a good fit for them. So perhaps you are offering them something that perhaps they don't have a lot of on campus, or you have a kind of way of approaching things that is in line with how they do things at their university. Maybe you can offer to be able to afford to attend that university. That could be an element of fit. And then there's all sorts of lifestyle and all sorts of geographic considerations to throw into fit as well. So that idea of fit is really important. It's a lot about asking yourself the kinds of what do you want from your university experience. And the great news is there's loads of resources on our website to help you identify some of those things. You can't know what you're looking for unless you've defined what you're looking for first. So that would be my top tip. As you go then into this process, if I can have the next slide, you're going to want to start to think about the different options that are out there and assessing those against that idea of fit, and starting to then narrow down your options into a list of universities that you might apply to. So this kind of sense of university research is super important at this point. You can find out information about universities on their websites, you can meet them at a fair, and surprise, surprise, there is a fair coming up this weekend, which is a great news for all of you if you're researching US universities. You can contact the university to find out more. You could follow them on their social media. They have everything from Facebook to Snapchat, and everything in between. So you can find out more about them there. You can get in touch with the university and perhaps ask to speak to a British student. You can watch videos on YouTube. There's loads of different ways to get to know a university, even if you don't have an opportunity to go and visit that university itself. Next slide. So this is where you want to come back to this idea of university research. You want to get under the skin of those universities that you're looking at to really understand what makes them tick. And why you might be a really good fit for that university. If it were me, I would possibly be running a spreadsheet. That's just how I'm built. So I'd have a spreadsheet keeping track of my universities, keeping track of things I'm interested in, perhaps keeping track of important deadlines or cost to attend or scholarships that I might apply for, just really keeping myself organized and on top of things. Next slide. I just want to cover off a really quick note on the Ivy League. We get lots of questions about this. So it's really important to know that the Ivy League does not equal the Russell Group over here. Russell Group being a group of UK universities that have named themselves an elite research group of universities. In the US, the Ivy League is simply a sports league. It's 8 universities that are geographically close enough that they can drive to each other's campuses to play football. That is all the Ivy League is, and there is no joining the Ivy League and there is no leaving the Ivy League. Many people are surprised to hear that universities like MIT and Stanford and UCLA, they're not in the Ivy League and they're never going to be in the Ivy League. So don't assume that Ivy League equals Russell Group like it would here, and don't limit yourself too much. The other thing I just want to flag is 1% of universities here in the UK would be about 1.2 universities. Top 1% in the US, you're talking about 40 universities, probably most of those you've not heard of yet. So again, just don't limit yourself to schools that you've heard of. There may be an amazing university that you haven't yet heard of, could be a perfect fit for you. Next slide. I'm now going to pass over to Holly to talk a little bit about funding your studies.
Fantastic, thank you, Rowena. So funding your studies is one of the things that we get asked about a lot here at Education USA and at the Fulbright Commission. And so in this section, I want to be kind of dispel some of the myths that often float around about funding US study and the cost of attendance at US universities that can seem quite high on the face of it. It is absolutely possible to have an affordable US university experience. That is something that I can speak to on a personal level as a British student who has done that. And so that's why it really is important to put in the time, as Rowena was mentioning, to research what's out there, go into this with an open mind and explore the different options available to you. So to start us off, I am quickly going to run through where the money comes from. And I suppose there are 4 main sources of funding that are typically considered in this process. So the first is personal or family funds. Unlike the UK-based system, here in the UK, we have a very loans-based system. You'll get your university place and apply for a student loan. In the US, there is a real expectation that your family will make an investment in your education rather than that loans-based piece. And so oftentimes US universities will expect for your family to prioritize your education and invest in that education in some way. Next, there are US universities themselves, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more depth on the next slide, but there are two main types of US university funding: need-based financial aid and merit-based scholarships. US universities are going to vary in how much funding they're able to offer to international students, and indeed if they are able to offer funding to international students. So we'll talk about this in a bit more depth on the next slide, but this is just something to be aware of going into it. Third on the list is external funding bodies, and again I'll talk about these in a bit more depth, but these are external to universities and might be a charity or organisation that has a vested interest in funding international education. And then finally we have loans, and we put these last on the list because we advise that these be your final resort. You are not able to transfer your UK student loan to a US university, and US-based loan companies require that you have a US citizen or a US permanent resident co-sign on a loan, which makes things quite tricky. You can take out UK third-party loans, but we caution that you're really careful because these can sometimes have, quite high interest rates and long payback terms, which might even require that you start paying those back while you're a student and obviously not earning. So if you do have US citizenship though, just to plug here that you can take out federal loans in the USA through FAFSA. So just to kind of flag that piece on loans. But these are the kind of main four sources of funding that are available to you in funding your US study, and it may be possible to pull from a variety of these different sources in making that education in the USA a possibility for you. Okay, so as mentioned, I'm going to dive in and talk a little bit more about the different opportunities for university funding at US colleges. So the first, just to kind of give you an overview of university funding, this is absolutely an ideal source of funding because in many cases this is money that you don't have to pay back. So if you can access university funding, that is absolutely brilliant. And so just to kind of dive into what each of these look like, need-based financial aid is based on your financial need, which is often determined by the university itself. So what this means is US universities will gather some information to get a picture of your family's financial background, and from that they'll calculate an expected family contribution towards whatever their cost of attendance is, which is usually a large figure listed on their website, but it will be broken down into a range of different factors that is included in that sum. So it won't just be tuition like our rates are here in the UK. It will be tuition, but it will also include things like your room and board, any additional costs like travel to the university, books, personal expenditure, and so it will be a very comprehensive fee. So don't be too put off if this fee looks quite large. It really often, cost of attendance includes a range of different factors in your funding. And so essentially US universities will calculate what is reasonable for your family to contribute towards that amount, and they will try to bridge whatever that gap looks like. So let's say a university's cost of attendance is $50,000 a year. The university will gather that information and they might calculate that your family is able to contribute $5,000 a year towards that amount. You're then left with a $45,000 gap. and the university will try to bridge that gap as best as they can. And usually universities will be very upfront and explicit on their website about how much of that gap they are able to meet. Some will be able to meet 100%, which is brilliant. Others might only be able to meet 20% or 80%, which is where you then might have to pull on those other sources of funding that we mentioned earlier on. So that's kind of how need-based financial aid works. We next have merit-based scholarships. And so merit-based scholarships are, as the name suggests, based on a particular merit. So it might be that you have excelled in a particular academic area, or it might be that you are a leader in one of your extracurricular activities, or you are involved in particular, I don't know, organisation or something like that. And these will be specific to the university in many cases, and so you want to double check what is on offer to international students and whether these have any particular separate application processes along with that. Finally, we've put up here sports scholarships, and again, we don't have time to go too much into detail about this, but if you do have further questions later on, we're happy to take those in the Q&A. And there's a great opportunity to learn more about sports scholarships at College Day, because we will have a representative from the NCAA and various university presentations about becoming a student athlete. Okay, I also want to touch on external funding bodies. So external funding bodies there are a range of different funding bodies on offer, and these are essentially external to universities. So these might include trusts, charities, private donors that are committed to a particular educational mission. And so much like a kind of niche scholarship, external funding bodies often have specific qualities that they're looking for in their applicants, and they'll also often have their own application processes, so you want to be looking out for these and what they entail. So these might be based on things like gender, country of origin, any particular talents or interests that you have, ethnicity, medical conditions, religious denominations, you name it. There's likely to be an external funding body out there that meets your particular characteristics and interests. It's just a case of finding them. And so there are plenty of resources on our website that enable you to locate these types of external funding bodies. So I'd really encourage you to have a look on there under our funding section to get a better sense of that. Great. So just to wrap up the funding section, I'm going to quickly go through some things that you can consider in making US universities more affordable. First of all is cost of living. Now, much like where I'm from in Liverpool and where I live now in London, there is a big difference in cost of living. And so this same principle applies in the US. If you are looking to live slap bang in the middle of Manhattan versus somewhere a little bit more rural, perhaps somewhere like Vermont, the cost of living is going to vary significantly between state to state and between whether you're in a more rural or suburban area versus a more urban area. So funding is a consideration for you. That's one way in which you might look to lower the cost of living and the cost of attendance at a particular university. The next thing is to have a look at the cost of tuition. Now, as Rowena mentioned at the beginning, there's not a great deal of standardization across US universities. You're not going to find that all US universities cost X amount, and each has their, sets their own tuition rates at their own discretion. So you might seek out US universities that have a lower cost of attendance and cost of tuition to make that more affordable for you. And then finally, you might look at universities that offer more funding opportunities, like the ones I just mentioned, for international students. And so just to kind of caution with that, there might be a bit of a trade-off between tuition and funding. So where there is a low tuition rate at a particular university, you might find that because of that, there's not a great deal of funding on offer for international students. But at the same time, you might look at a university that's got quite a high rate of tuition or cost of attendance, but they have lots and lots of funding opportunities available, which can actually reduce that cost of attendance down significantly. So you just want to be thinking about these three factors and how they kind of interact with one another to really find a university and a setup that is affordable for you. Great. So we're now going to pass over to Rowena, who's going to talk a little bit more about completing your US application.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Holly. So how do you go about applying? It's a question we get a lot. What does the application process look like, especially if you're familiar with UCAS, the UK's university application system? So it's first worth just having a little look at what are universities looking for when they are looking at applications from a UK student or from a student applying to their university. So Holly, if I could have the next slide. Okay, so this application process is a little bit different. So what is a US university looking for from an application? They want to know, first of all, are you a great student? Are you somebody who's going to fit in well with their academic program at their universities? They want to know, what have you done with your high school education so far? So they want to know if you are in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. They want to know about your GCSEs and then ASs or A-levels, depending on what you're sitting, or the IB. If you're in Scotland, they'll want to know about your Nat 5s, and then they'll also want to know about your hires and advanced hires. So they'll be measuring your academic performance, understanding what kind of student you are, what subjects you've taken, and how you did in those. So far so good. That's probably quite similar to a UK university, but a US university also wants to know about this idea of academic fit. Are you a good fit for how they teach at their university? Are you kind of coming with the kind of questions that they approach? Each university is so very different, and so they want to know, are you going to be a good academic fit for our university? Does your brain work in the kind of way that perhaps that university kind of teaches in? Universities can do things very differently, and so they'll be assessing a student's academic fit. But unlike UK universities, perhaps, US universities are really big on the campus culture, and not just the classroom, but also what you do outside the classroom and that learning experience outside the classroom. So it's not just about turning up to lectures and sitting in seminars or labs and then leaving. They want to know what kind of thing you already do with your spare time, and how do you make the most of the spare time that you have. So when you're not in class, what are you doing with your time? You might be you could be, playing sports. You could be in the drama club. You could have a part-time job. You might be volunteering. You might run your own YouTube channel. Perhaps you have a passion for K-pop. Maybe you play esports. Maybe you volunteer in your community. Perhaps you take part in a faith community. Maybe you have family responsibilities like looking after younger siblings. Any of these things are what we would call extracurriculars, and they're all important because they're all linked to what you value or the things that you commit your time to, and it's a way of showing the university what matters to you and what kind of person you are. So a US university will be looking at those as well, and then they'll also be looking at what we've called here personal attributes. It's kind of quite a nebulous term, but they'll want to know about how you see the world, what kind of person you are. They'll want to know about, obviously, things like leadership, when perhaps you've stood up for things that you believe in. Maybe what kind of person are you? Are you somebody who is always like jumping in there with a thought or an idea straight away? Or perhaps you're somebody who takes a step back and has an actual think about the situation and then comes up with something really considered. Both of these things are great, and neither is better than the other. It's just a US university wants to understand how you approach the world, and they also want to understand the context in which you've come from. So some people might grow up in an inner city, and that might give you all sorts of opportunities that someone like me who grew up in the countryside might not have had. So US university also wants to understand the context for what you've achieved, and recognize that each person has a different journey along the way. Next slide. So what goes into an application? So the first thing to know is each application is going to be made separately, but there are some common things that go into an application for a US university. There'll be an application form with biographical detail about you, so name and address and whether you've got siblings and what your parents do and what you study at school, but it will also cover your extracurriculars, so the things you do with your spare time. You will also be asked for a couple of essays, normally 2 to 3 essays. One will be a longer piece that will be quite different to anything you've ever written here at school in the UK, and really, really different to your personal statement. So your essay is kind of a window into who you are and what you're all about. And then the university may ask you to do some additional essays to show your research, to show your understanding of the university and your kind of personality coming through. Some universities may ask for admissions exams. We're going to cover those in a sec, so I'm just going to move over those, but if the university does ask for those, then those go into your application. And then you'll also need some letters of recommendation. So these are going to be letters from teachers at your current school. They are going to, 2 or 3 teachers will write a letter of recommendation for you. You will not see those letters. They will get sent directly to the university in support of your application. And then there's a couple of other things that go into your application, something called a transcript. Wouldn't get too hung up on the word. Essentially, it is a listing made by your teachers of your grades to date. So if you've done GCSEs or Nat 5s, it will list those out. And then if you've done things like A-levels, ASs, BTECs, hires, IB, whatever, it will also list out either the grades you've achieved so far or your predictions for those subjects. So that's what a transcript is. And then finally, there'll be an application fee per university. So again, you want to just be thoughtful and mindful of that, because those costs can mount up. Next slide. Okay, so we get a lot of questions about admissions exams. I'm going to touch on them fairly briefly. If there are more questions about them, I'm happy to take them in the Q&A. So the admissions exams that US universities may ask for are called the SAT or the ACT. They're essentially the same. Think Coke versus Pepsi. At the end of the day, they are exactly the same thing, but some people have a preference for one or the other. These exams help admissions officers compare American students who have studied, there's no national curriculum, so students across America may be studying quite different things, and so an admissions exam, either the ACT or the SAT, helps American admissions officers compare different students to each other. These exams are testing kind of basic skills around numeracy, kind of mathematical ability, as well as reasoning and verbal skills, perhaps reading comprehension. They are multiple choice, and they are quite long exams that cover a lot of ground. You can take them here in the UK, you don't have to go to America to take them. And there is universities that ask for these exams have no preference between the ACT or the SAT. There is neither one is better than the other. It's a personal preference of which one you sit. More American students actually take the ACT rather than the SAT. These exams, not all universities ask for them. So the first thing you should do is check if the university actually requires them, because nobody is about the life where you have to take extra exams. But if you do need to take them and the university that you're looking at does want them, then you might need to factor this into your decision-making journey as well. And then just a quick note for this year, this application cycle, so if you're going to apply in this academic year, many universities, in fact pretty much all of them, have recognised it's been really hard to sit the SAT or the ACT in a global pandemic, and so they are what's called test optional this year, which means that you can choose whether to submit an exam result or not. But here in the UK, we will all be submitting our school exams nonetheless. So these are on top of your school exams. So you're going to want to just factor that into your thinking as well. So don't assume that these go in place of your GCSEs and your A-levels or your Nat 5s and hires. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I just want to cover a couple of things to just let you know how we can help if you are interested in US study. Next slide. These are our Education USA support that we can offer. So first of all, I just want to flag our website. Hopefully you registered for this event on our website, but we have an amazing guide to every step of making a US application with loads of different links to loads of amazing resources. So please do go and check this out. It's all on our website. I'm going to ask Holly to pop a link perhaps in the chat box to the university guide to making an application. So please do use the resource that is available. You can have the next slide. And we also take questions by phone and by email. So if you come across the process and you want to ask someone how something works, then please do ask us a question. Good news, this Saturday, we will also have a whole fair and whole area of the fair where you can pop in and ask us questions as well. Next. We also run all sorts of free events about studying in the USA, so that is all available. Please do have a look on our website. We're letting everybody know about all the upcoming events. This year, all of our events will be digital. We will not be meeting anyone in person, but in other years, we have run in-person events or digital events, and you will see us in a normal year traveling around the UK as well. Next. I also just want to flag the Sutton Trust US programme, just in case anybody is interested. If you are in a year 12 at a state school in the UK, listen up. We're looking for high achieving year 12 students, so measuring your either NAT5 or GCSE performance, high achieving students from low income families. Just to flag the Sutton Trust US programme, we support students through this programme in discovering US study, exploring their options, and it includes a trip to visit US universities. And then for those students that want, we will support them through the process of applying for an undergraduate study in the USA. So that is that. Next, please. Okay, so we just wanted to come on to Saturday, USA College Day. This is the 43rd year of USA College Day, but guess what? Very first year of a digital fair. So I'm just going to hand over to Holly to talk a little bit about some of the suggestions that we have to make the most of the event.
Great. So let's just dive right into some of these top tips. I'm putting a slide up on the screen and I'll walk us through them in just a moment. And then I'll also go in and show you what to expect on the day and on the platform that we're going to be using. So ahead of the affair, in this kind of get prepared section, there are two top tips. So the first is to research the universities that are attending, and we actually have a page on our website that lists all of those that are currently confirmed, and I'll show you where that is in just a moment, but you can access it through the Virtual USA College Day event page, which is hopefully where you've all registered for the fair. Secondly is to have a plan. So the fair will take place from between 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. UK time. We are not expecting that you have to spend all of that time on screen talking to reps. Instead, of course, if you have plans in the early afternoon, you can come later on in the day and vice versa. And so we would encourage you to take a look at the resources that are on our website relating to our application bootcamp sessions, because we actually have a range of university presentations taking place throughout the day. Again, these are on our website. Several of these will take place at different times or multiple times throughout the day rather. So you can kind of plan your day around the sessions that you really want to attend and the universities that you'd like to see throughout the day. Okay, so on the day, some top tips to get ready for the fair. First of all is if you have registered for Virtual USA College Day, you will receive an access link via email on Friday the 25th of September to the email address that you registered for. It's really important that you don't panic if you can't see anything straight away, but double check in your junk folders, in your spam folders, just in case the email link has gone through to there. On the day as well, we'll show you how this works in a little bit, but you'll be most likely speaking face to face like this with your audio on and with your video on if you feel comfortable with university reps. So we would ensure that you are in a quiet place where you feel comfortable talking, and where you feel comfortable kind of having that background on display, because virtual backgrounds aren't supported on the platform that we're using. Another top tip is to make sure that you have charged your device before the fair and have a charger handy. Another note on devices is that laptops or desktop computers are the best way to access the fair, although mobile phones can also be used if you don't have access to one of those devices. Next is to have a notepad handy. It's likely that you'll be speaking to a lot of different universities with a range of different offerings throughout your time at the fair. And so it's always good to jot some ideas down and reflect on the time that you've had. Sometimes it can be a really effective way to digest that information by picking up a pen and doing it the old-fashioned way of writing down some ideas that you've learned. The other thing is to come prepared with questions, and we've put in here intelligent questions. Now you might be thinking, what is one of those? So we can talk about that a little bit more in the Q&A section at the end. But an intelligent question is one that is well thought out. You know, you've clearly done some research into these universities that you're meeting with throughout the day. It's not a question that you can really quickly in 2 minutes find the answer to on the university website. And so, you know, really having to think about what are those nitty-gritty questions that you want to know the answers to, because this is really your opportunity to meet with those people who are making admissions decisions about your application. Okay, so when you get to the fair, here are some top tips. First and foremost is that us Education USA advisors are on hand to help you at the fair. And so in the application bootcamps area of the fair, we'll have a session that is available throughout the day where you can just drop in and in a no pressure environment ask us any questions that you have about US study before perhaps going and speaking to a US university rep who's likely to make admissions decisions about you. You can come and clarify any questions you have more broadly with us. Likewise on the stage area, which I'll go in and show you, we're going to have kind of different sessions about US study and finding funding and that kind of thing. You're all in a great position because you've already learned from us today some of those basic concepts, but if you want a refresher, you can always head back to the stage area to learn more. As I alluded to before, we also have bootcamp seminars or application bootcamp sessions taking place throughout the day. These are on a range of different topics, from how to write a standout application essay, to applying to highly competitive universities, to becoming a US athlete, and work opportunities on campus as an international student. We also have a student panel and a parent panel, so you can kind of speak to students and parents who've been in your shoes through this process, and get some first-hand experience from British students and parents. So these are a really great resource to refer to throughout the day. And then a top tip from us is to visit the booths of at least 5 universities that you've not previously considered or perhaps even heard of. Just to give you some personal experience, I actually found out my university by attending this event this time many moons ago at at the time, USA College Day. And so this event is a really great way to push yourself out of your comfort zone and speak to a couple of universities that you've not previously heard of or considered. And you might actually find a really great fit university for you. So before handing over to Rowena to talk a little bit more about tips for speaking to university reps, I'm actually going to go in and share my screen and show you a little bit of what to expect on the day on the platform that we'll be using. Okay. Great. So the platform that we're going to use looks a little something like this. And so currently we are in the reception area, but as you can see on the left-hand side, there are 4 different main areas throughout the event. There is the stage, the application bootcamp, and the university fair. And I'll go in and show you what those look like just now. So on the stage, as I mentioned before, we will have a series of videos that are playing throughout the day, and you can access these freely as you wish. And these will talk about some of those more general concepts of US studies. So if you're struggling about where to begin, the stage is a really great place to find your feet and get familiar with those concepts. Next, we have the application bootcamp session, and I'll run through where to find the schedule for these in just a moment. But as you can see, this is just an example of some of the sessions that are going to be taking place throughout the day. So if you go in and click on here, you would tune into a university presentation about how to write a US admissions essay and get some top tips for putting together that document. The main kind of section of the event, however, is the university fair. So if we click on this tab down here, as you can see, there are a range of different US universities, and you can scroll down to explore the different US universities as we go through the day. And now I'm going to go into Vanderbilt's booth just to give you an example of what this looks like. And I think Rowena is going to be in the booth to help me demo this. So entering the booth, I'm just going to mute you there, Rowena. So you will click this share audio and video button, and you can click apply. And then you can go in and have a conversation with the university reps. The university might be sharing their screen or something like that to show you some pictures of campus or some slides. And then once you're done, you can leave whenever you feel fit. But I also want to pull up this tab down the side here. So by clicking this arrow up the top, it brings out a tab so you can learn more information about the university whose booth you're visiting. And if you want to, you can click this blue button down here to request more information and stay connected with the university. If you're having issues with your audio and video, you can also click this chat button. And so Rowena's already sent me a message to say, hello, this is a place to ask questions. So I might ask Rowena a question just by typing something in this box and clicking here. So that's kind of an overview about how the platform works. And I'm going to now click leave and wave goodbye to Rowena. And then if I head back to the university fair, I can then go in and explore a different university if I would like to. Great. So I'm also going to, while we're here and sharing my screen, show you some resources to help you prepare for the event, which I was talking about before. So if you actually navigate to the main event page, excuse me, make sure that you have registered here for a ticket, because registration for this event is separate for the actual event. So make sure if you haven't already that everyone in your party has gone in and registered here. Then scrolling down, we actually have a list of confirmed universities, so you can kind of plan out your day a little bit and get to grips with the different universities that will be joining us. And each of these have their own profile, so you can click on, for example, Colleges of Contra Costa and learn a little bit more about their offerings and links to their website and things like that, to give you a sense of what's out there and who you might want to go and see on the day. Also on this page, we have a link to the application bootcamp info sessions, which is just up here. And as you can see, we've got a list of the timings throughout the day and the different sessions that will take place. So for example, the student and parent panels will take place at 4 p.m. throughout the day. And as you can see, as I mentioned, that Q&A drop-in with Education USA is an opportunity that will take place throughout the day. So we're more than happy to come and help you out where we can. So I'm now going to head back to the PowerPoint slides and pass over to Rowena, who's going to give some top tips on speaking to reps throughout the day.
Fantastic, thank you, Holly, and lots of questions coming in the chat. If you're able to, we would love it if you want to pop any questions in the Q&A box. That will really help us keep on top of the questions, but we will come back round to the questions that have come up, so we'll just cover off this last little bit. Okay, so speaking to reps, the first thing that might sound a little bit intimidating, but I absolutely promise you all of the reps who are coming to USA College Day would absolutely love to be in London in person, but this year they can't be, but they are all here to meet you and they're all super excited. They're making a special effort to get up really early American time to come and meet with students from the UK, and that's because they want to talk to you and meet with you, and hopefully the system that we've got is going to allow you to be able to have those conversations. It won't be too intimidating. You'll be able to go into a booth and there might be other people in the booth learning about that university too. Maybe the admissions officer will be there, or it might be just you in the booth, in which case that is such a great opportunity to get to know the admissions officer and stand in your own spotlight. So just to flag that up. So my first tip here would just be to think about being strategic. So the admissions officers that you meet, they are the decision makers. It's not quite like a university here in the UK where you might meet somebody who's representing the university, but actually the decision is made by someone else. The people that you often will meet in at USA College Day are going to be the people who actually make decisions about your application. So this is the moment to be on full charm offensive, to just have a think about what kind of impression you would like to make, and how you might like to come across. And it's not uncommon for me to hear from an admissions officer to say to me, "Oh, Rowena, I remember his application. I met him at College Day. Great student, super excited. I was so happy when I opened his application and realized that this was the person I've met at College Day." So it's just a really great way to engage with admissions officers, to impress them and to kind of get noticed. And often these admissions officers are also the people who will recommend people for scholarships, who will fight in your corner in an admissions committee. So it's just a really great way to share who you are a little bit with the admissions officer, and ask some really great questions. So it's a great moment to impress them. If you are attending as a student, we are so excited. So we know that some people may have parents or other family members or carers or guardians or sisters or uncles or whoever who might be interested in coming along, and we so welcome all of your friends and family as well. My tip here is just that I would really encourage it. If you are a student who is interested in attending a US university, lead that conversation. It's a million times more impactful for you to be asking the questions rather than sitting back and perhaps letting your mum do it for you. Sometimes an admissions officer will say to me, "But Rowena, I'm not looking to admit the mum or dad, I'm actually looking to admit the student." So a million times more impactful if you're able to ask some of those questions. We know that parents often have questions and they are absolutely fine to ask, but if possible, if the young person can lead the conversation, that is really helpful. We'd really encourage you, if you're in a university booth and maybe you are just learning a bit more, maybe you're just a bit interested, or you're super interested in that university, there is that button to show your interest and kind of stay in touch with the university. So please do use that. We'll register your interest, and then the university can kind of get in touch with you and start to develop that relationship potentially. So just a real encouragement, use that interest button in the booths. And then my final tip here is to just follow up. Think of this a little bit like a job interview or something, in the sense of you want to make a good impression, you want to be memorable, and so a short note, if you meet a university you're really interested in, a little note to the admissions officer. Their details will be available and they'll be sharing their details. Just a little email, professional, "Dear such and such, it was really great to meet you at USA College Day. You know, I learned a lot about your university, and maybe I've got a couple of follow-up questions. Really great ways to just help yourself be noticed and stand out in the process. So, and those were just some strategic tips that we wanted to give alongside some of those more kind of here's how it's actually working.